So part 9 here on page 10 is a big one because we're really going to talk more about the periodic table we started to in part 8, but in part 9 we're going to keep building on that. So in your warm-up, thinking about where the metals are in the periodic table from other science classes, maybe you have an idea, maybe you don't. If you don't, you're going to learn it in this unit or this part. So you'll see the why, and then today's targets, you need to make sure you use the words group and period appropriately when we talk about the periodic table. They mean different things. Also, figuring out where the metals, nonmetals, and metalloids are big things too, okay? So in terms of getting some definitions down, I'm really going to work on some definitions that are going to be important for us today, okay? So starting with groups and periods, which are in that target list. So the first thing here with groups, we're going to be talking, when we say the group of the periodic table, we're talking about the columns. So just to be clear, that's up and down, okay? So if you're saying what group is it in, you're asking what column of the periodic table it is in. So periods are the rows. So if you say what period is it in, you're talking about which row, which is, again, horizontal there. Okay, so left and right. So which row are we talking about the periodic table? The steps are interesting because these steps we're going to draw on your periodic table in a second. So again, make sure you have that handy, but they're going to help separate the metals and the non-metals. So I'm going to abbreviate metal, M, non-metals, NM there, okay? But what's important with the steps is that we actually draw it. So if you look at your periodic table here, we need to make sure we draw in these steps, and you need to have them in their correct location, okay? Now, when we talk about steps, we're looking at where can we separate the metals and the nonmetals so that we can understand what these look like, okay? So I need you on your periodic table to actually draw these in because we're going to be talking about them a lot, and you need to make sure you have this line there. So the steps they're going to do, and they kind of look like a set of steps. So they're going to go down like this. So if you see my blue line, it looks like a staircase, right? Like someone could climb down here, right? There's the person. They're going to go start climbing the steps. They're going to climb up here, then here, and here, and here, and here, and so forth, okay? So that's why it's called this steps, because it looks like a staircase, okay? But drawing those in there is going to be important because they're going to help us decide where the metals and the nonmetals are, okay? So of these steps here, right? So if I continue the line up here just to show you, right? This way would be our metals. This way is our nonmetals. So if you're on the right of the step, you're a nonmetal. If you're on the left of the steps, you're metals. So this entire area, just to show you, you do not need to do this to your periodic table. I'm just showing you. So this whole area here, okay, those are all including here because these two come up into these empty spots. So these are all metals, okay? So if I ask you if like chromium is a metal, you would say yes because it's on the left of the steps. Over here on this side, we've got our nonmetals, okay? So these guys are referred to as nonmetals, meaning that they just act differently and they're nonmetals, okay? But what's really important too with the metals and the nonmetals is that you go off of what side they're on. We also have some metalloids that are tricky, and we'll write these down on your notes here in a second. But I need you to mark these metalloids. Metalloids, by definition, are kind of like a hybrid. So they act kind of like a metal, they act kind of like a nonmetal, so they make their own group, okay? So they're along the steps, but it's only certain one of these. So if I mark them in green here, that's a metalloid, and you need to like put a star or something with these elements so you know that these are the metalloids. So it's Si, Ge, okay? Kind of goes on every side of the step. So over to the As, down to the Sb, over to the Te, down to the Po, and the At. So those in green, so At, Po, Te, Sb, As, Ge, and Si, those are what we call the metalloids that border the step there. So they act kind of like a metal, kind of like a non-metal, so it's like they're a hybrid of them, okay? So like aluminum's on the left of the steps, that's called a metal too. I'm making that purple, so those are all metals, okay? And then on the right of the steps here, boron, carbon, phosphorus, sulfur, selenium, and so forth, these are all our nonmetals, okay? But it's just these ones in green here in the middle, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that are called our metalloids, okay? So you want to star these ones that are in green just to make sure you know, and you can write at the top here like star equals metalloid, whatever, okay? They're the only exceptions to the metal and the non-metal rule. So metals, you want to write them in here. Left of steps, the metalloids are the right of steps. Transition metals, okay, are interesting just because they're that group that's kind of in the middle. So the transition metals, you can mark these if you'd like, but they start here and go to here. So it's like this middle group here. These are what we call the transition metals. Okay, that would include these guys down. Okay. So I'm going to write for the transition metals that they're in the middle of the periodic table. Okay. They're in that group that has the lower, like it's like rows are missing at the top. The metalloids we marked in green, so along the steps. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. Okay, you should have them marked on your periodic table. And the noble gases is a group that we talk about a decent amount, so just so you're familiar with that term. The noble gases are in this last column here. I'm marking them in yellow, which makes them green there, okay? So this last column, these are called our noble gases, this column right there, okay? We're going to talk about them because they have some different properties since they're noble gases. So last column on the right. Okay. Now, we're going to practice some things with the periodic table in front of you so you can get used to figuring out atomic and mass number, protons and electrons from the last part that we did. Columns and periods, okay, are going to be the new ones we're identifying, as well as if they're metals or non-metals. Again, you're going to get more familiar with this as you go, okay, but for right now, I'm going to help you kind of look through these. So the first one we're looking at is hydrogen. Hydrogen is the very first element up here. So it has an atomic number of 1, a mass number of 1.008 there. So we have atomic or symbols H 1, 1.0. Okay. This number 1 is the number of protons and electrons from part 8. Okay. The column that it's in, that means which up and down column. Okay, what group? It's the first column, periodic table. Okay, and it's in the very first row of the periodic table. So it's 1 and 1. And the last question there, if it's a metal or a non-metal. Okay, I do need you to mark this next to hydrogen because it's one exception here. So on your periodic table, please mark, circle it, and write non-metal. Technically, it's to the left of the steps if you want to argue that, but the steps kind of stop here, so it's kind of like above the steps anyway. But I need you to know that hydrogen is a non-metal. Okay. Next one is bromine. So we look on the periodic table. Here's our bromine. Okay. So over here, 35. Okay. So we have 35. 35 is that atomic number, the mass number of 79.9. Okay, that's what we're writing here. So we go back, we get 35, 79.9. Notice it's Br. Okay. Atomic number then is our number of protons, so 35. It's our number of electrons as well. Our column number, okay. So if you count over, columns are groups, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So notice that's what that 17 means there, so you don't have to count every time. You can also refer to it as number 7, like they use 7a here, but I would accept either 17 or 7 because of those two numbers there. Now, rows, okay, or period numbers, this is row 1, even though it's just hydrogen, helium. Row 2, row 3, so it's row 4, okay? But we keep going here, we have column 7 or 17, I would accept either one, and then the period is 4. It's to the right of the steps, that makes it a non-metal, okay? So we'll do 1 or 2 more here together, okay, and then you're going to try some, and you'll see the rest of the answers for these too that I have posted, so you can check those as well. But once you get the hang of it, you should be good to go. So aluminum is the next one here. Aluminum is right here, 13 and 26.9. So 13, Al, 13, 26.9. So 13, 13. The column number you could look up top there, okay? So it's 13 as well. And then the period, this is row 1, 2, 3, okay? So we have 13, period 3, and it's to the left of the steps, that makes it a metal. Okay, so go ahead and you can keep trying these, and then you can try these problems on the right and check your work and see how you're doing.